The presidential system of government is the theoretical opposite of parliamentary government. Its basic framework is the theory of separation of powers. The three powers of government should be vested in three different and independent organs of government in order to avoid the danger of despotism. This is the features of presidential government. The first one is separation of powers. This states that each one of the three branches of government, such as the legislature, who enacts the laws, the executive, who has the power to execute the laws, and judiciary, should exercise only the powers and the function delegated to it by the Constitution. Another features of presidential government is the absence of a nominal head, which is the head of the state only in name, because his powers of government are ceremonial and not real. The chief executive or the president is both ceremonial and the real head of the state, and in the discharge of his powers and functions, he is assisted by a small group of advisors called cabinet secretaries, who are appointed by the president. These cabinet secretaries are responsible to the president alone because his power to appoint includes the power to remove them at will. The third feature of presidential system of government is that the cabinet secretaries are not members of the Congress. The chief executive and his cabinet secretaries are not members of the lawmaking body. And the last one is checks and balances. In order to ensure the workings of the theory of separation of powers, a system of checks and balances has been worked out as a corollary principle. The three branches of the government should check one another in order to prevent any of them to become too strong so as to be able to take over the others' powers and functions, thereby participating in return to absolutism. We list down some of the advantages of the presidential form of government. First, it has fixed term of office of its chief executive or its president. This provides the president an ample time and opportunity to pursue consistently public policies in order to achieve the result during his term of office. The second one is the separation and distribution of governmental powers into the three branches of government. The third one is the election of the president by a direct vote of the electorate. Then the further disadvantage of election is that in presidential elections, the candidates are not known personally by the people, the voters, except for the few, have no knowledge or personal knowledge of the candidate's background, temperament, qualifications, and more importantly, their vested interest in the society. The result is that the electorate just vote for a particular candidate not because of his or her good qualifications and party platforms, but because of personal considerations.
Parliamentary government. It is a government in which the parliament is supreme over the other branches of the government. Okay, features of the parliamentary government. So, one is the fusion of powers. Under the parliamentary system of government, legislative and executive powers of the government are fused together and vested in the lawmaking body called the parliament. This institution exercises the most important power of the government, which are the power to make the law and the power to execute the law. Another unique feature of the parliamentary government is the existence of two executive chiefs. Now, one is the titular head or the ceremonial head of the state, represented by the monarch, who acquires his or her title by hereditary succession, who can be the king or queen or the emperor, who can represent. But it can also be represented by the president, who acquires his office by direct or indirect vote of the electorate. And the other real head or the head of the government, called prime minister or primer, who acquires his position for being the leader of the majority party, also known as the ruling party, and for having been elected by his colleagues in the parliament. The prime minister exercises his real powers of the government, while the monarch exercises ceremonial powers. Okay, the third is that cabinet members must be members of the parliament. All members or majority of the cabinet must be members of the parliament, for a reason that the executive officers could lead the parliament in lawmaking, and in turn, members of the parliament could make the cabinet members responsible for any case of maladministration of the government affairs through the question R and the vote of confidence. Okay, question R. Question R refers to the limited amount of time set apart at every sitting of Parliament for questioning by any members of the Parliament to any cabinet members on matters pertaining to his ministry. It is important for it serves as a partial check to the bureaucratic ineptitude and abuses by keeping the experts, which are the cabinet members, responsive to a body of laymen. Some instances, it answers to the questions which leads to a discovery of mismanagement of the affairs of the government, which in turn might lead to the issuance of the vote of no confidence by the opposition party. Okay, no confidence vote. For any reason, but basically because of the mismanagement of the government, once the parliament members lose their confidence with the cabinet, they may issue a no confidence vote against it. After such vote has been issued, the prime minister has two choices, yes or yes. Well, charot. Kidding aside, the real choices is to either resign voluntarily or to dissolve the parliament. That's it. Okay, advantages of the parliamentary government. Due to the fusion of powers, as I've said before, wherein the legislative and the executive powers of the government are combined together and vested in the legislature, there is unity and facility of the adoption and execution of the public policies. Since it is a parliamentary government, the members of the cabinet and the majority of the members of the parliament belong to one and same political party, which is the majority or ruling party. It is inconceivable that each one of them will have a policy that is different from one another, and it is also practical that for one of the two to block the policy of each other. Okay, another advantage is that the participation and leadership of cabinet members as executive heads of various ministries of the government in the processes of lawmaking provides the other members of the parliament, which are the non-cabinet members, the needed information regarding the social conditions of the country, which are important in the formulation of appropriate solutions to the social problems. This is due to the prerequisite that the cabinet members must be members of the parliament. Parliamentary government also have its disadvantages. Well, one of them is the fusion of executive and legislative powers in one branch of the government. Well, it could be a fertile ground for the emergence of dictatorial form of government. It is said that the individual freedom would come to naught if the executive and legislative powers are united in the hands of one man or in the same body of magistrates. Okay, another disadvantage is the existence of two executives. Well, as I've mentioned before, um, the other head is the ceremonial, which is represented by the monarchs. Well, the ceremonial function is also a disadvantage since it is only an economic burden on the part of the taxpayers, and aside from that, the dominance of the ministry members in legislation accorded them by the requirement that bills of general concern, except those of local application, could only be introduced in the parliament with the approval of the cabinet, which deprives the other representatives of the people to have the right or opportunity to sponsor bills which might bring concrete solutions to the social problems that could be piloted by the ministry members.
Hi guys! Now let's talk about the presidential government in their pros and cons. First, let's talk about the pros of presidential government. Number 1. Elections are direct. The people are often elect the president directly to make the power of the president more legitimate in comparison to the power of a leader who is appointed indirectly. Second, the separation of power in presidential democracy. Presidential democracy establishes separations of the legislative from the executive. This allows to check and monitor the others to prevent the abuse and misuse of power. Now, let's talk about the pros and cons of parliamentary government. Number 1. Parliamentary government gives communities a better chance to have their concerns represented within their government. Number 2. A parliamentary government has the authority to hold elections whenever there is a need to do so to vote for changes. Now, let's talk about the cons of parliamentary government. Number 1. When the leader of the majority party or coalitions falls out of favor, he or she can be quickly replaced with a simple vote. Again, just a simple vote. Number 2. Elected officials may be forced to compromise on their statute.
Hi, I'm Dati, and I have a trivia for you. Did you know when the presidential system began? It was started in America in 1787. This system was invented by American founders. This is to replace decade-old frying structure and to provide an alternative to the parliamentary form of government. It became known as presidential because a directly elected president was its most salient difference. Let's go to parliamentary government. Did you know that today there are 51 countries that are currently operate under parliament government? Among these are United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Malaysia, New Zealand, Switzerland, and Thailand. Most of these countries function in combination with other systems, such as constitutional monarchy, in which monarch may share political power with parliament. And did you know that people refer to the British Parliament as the Mother of Parliament? This is because Britain developed the Westminster system of parliamentary democracy. Westminster system is otherwise known as responsible government. The term should not be confused with behaving responsibly. It refers to the concept of government being responsible and accountable to Parliament.